Hello, James Doyle here, and welcome to James Doyle's Garage. For today, my garage is actually Princess Auto. Thank you to Ian for letting me use the house. But today I'm going to be going over compressors and how to pick out the compressor that's right for you. And all you have to really know is the simple specs on each compressor. And I'm going to be focusing mostly on home use, garage use, and automotive shop use. And I've been able to do research for the past year, getting information from veteran, engineers and automotive guys, and even compressor engineers. So it is pretty good to learn all the knowledge I have. And I'm actually here with my dad as well, so say hi, Dad.
Hi, Dad.
So let's get into it right now. Most of the units we're going to be going over today is single phase 240 volt to 110 volt. And even a tiny little one that's a 12 volt for a car. Now, what's classified as low pressure is 0 to 150, and mid pressure is 150 up to 1,000. But the unit here that we're looking at here is just at 175. Now, there's mainly two types of compressors. One being a standard reciprocating compressor that's a piston powered, and then the other is a rotary compressor, also looked at and called a screw compressor, which is generally a lot higher end and a lot more expensive. But generally the piston-powered reciprocating one, which is looked as a standard one, will always do the job for what you'll need in a shop. Now here you can take a look at the simple specifications on this Sandborn unit. Now a good example to sort of look at is CFM. CFM equals cubic feet per minute. And what that means is how much air is moving through your hose into whatever tool you're using or whatever. And, it's really good. For example, this compressor, 17.9 CFM at 100 PSI is very, very good. You have to weigh the pressure with the cubic feet per minute to figure out what you should do.
Now I'm going to explain the core of these specifications. And for some of you that, might be all you need to know. Tank size is your reservoir of air, how long you'll get air before the motor has to turn on again. This one is an 80-gallon unit, and that is big. A big tank matters, because more of a consistent source you have, the better, especially for things like painting and sandblasting. The next is max pressure. Most of your needs won't go above 90 pounds per square inch unless you're using big pro pneumatic tools. I'll show you some of those tools and, the tools like that later in the video. I got this 175 Max Psi because I'm all in for auto building, and I just like the headroom, the extra headroom of pressure as well. CFM is a big one, and what rate of pressure you have. Again, that has everything to do with the tools you will use and what pressure and airflow you need. Two different specs here show what air pressure at what air volume. A little less air pressure will mean that you get a little bit more CFM or air output. Horsepower and voltage is also critical. You need to know what electrical power you have access to, how big an amp breaker you can use, and most portable units are 110 volt and draw less than 15 amp breaker, which most homes have. This 5 horsepower is at the top of the amp draw of most home shops. 5 horsepower draws about 28 amps at 220 volts. 30 amp breaker will do it. But you also need an 8 or 10 gauge wire. If you have 220 volts, use it. Less costing your electricity bill, like the one I got here. Smaller but very useful portable units generally always run on 110 volts. But now that we've got all this covered, let's get back to Princess Auto.
Now another consideration you have to look at is what kind of power you have. Now, these big 4 units behind me, they're all run on 230. Now, I'm fortunate enough to be able to get 240 at my home, so that's why I picked this big one right here to get the best I can get. But again, if you only have less power, you might have to go for some of the smaller units, which I'll talk about in a bit. Now, what's special about these ones here is that these ones are plug-ins that plug into your regular outlet at home, and just takes regular power, so you don't need any special power for these ones. But the difference, though, is that you are limited to the amount of CFM and pressure you can have. Now, the first compressor I want to show is this little compressor right here. It's a 12-volt unit, and it can actually run on batteries, believe it or not. And this one was really nifty because when I was moving one of my Mustangs, the tires was dead, and this unit really saved me big time. So, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes to fill up a standard tire on a car. And these can actually, this one reaches pressures of 100 psi, which is actually pretty good. And these are really good for filling up beach balls and at the beach, mattresses when you're in an RV or something like that. And these ones are just really good, nifty tools for when you need a few smaller things done. Now right here you can see it's a 7-gallon unit, pretty nifty unit. And my dad got a Power Fish just like this one 20 years ago. It's still running great, which is incredible. But just to show you guys, this one's really good for smaller things like brad nailers, staple guns, that kind of stuff. When you need to expand beyond that, you might want to look in some of the bigger units. Now, something I just want to show you guys here is it actually comes with a really nice kit of quite a bit of stuff, air nozzle, that good stuff. And it also comes with the hose and the air hose as well, which is pretty good as well. Now this is another nice unit here. It's kind of like a briefcase. You can pick it up. It's very mobile, very easy to move around. Has dual outputs, which is really good. It's kind of like a briefcase, which is good. You can pick it up, bring it places. So it's really good. But now let me get into the specifications on the box here. Now it has 3.2 CFM at 40 PSI, another standard number, 2.5 CFM at 90 PSI. So again, it's good to see these consistent standard numbers with a max PSI at 125. So this is, again, a pretty good unit for, again, your basic stuff that you have to do at home, brad nailers, staple guns, that kind of stuff. Again, but that one is a little bit more mobile. Now we're getting into some big boys. Now you can see I'm getting into the third unit here. This is a Sandborn Compressor, and since it has a bigger tank, yeah, it has to turn on and off less, which is very good for when you need consistent pressure. So example for when you're using a spray gun for painting or when you're sandblasting. So that's a pretty good example here. Now this is a 30-gallon unit, max PSI 135, pretty good, with a 5.5 CFM at 90 PSI. So that, again, good standard numbers, which is pretty good to see, and 6.3 CFM at 40 PSI. So it's all good to see. Again, being a 120 volt unit, it's pretty good. This stuff is good for when you're getting into some bigger stuff that you need. So an example is spray guns or even sandblasting, smaller sandblasting projects. Getting into the fourth unit I want to show here, this is our Pro Point unit here at Princess Auto. This is a big boy now. We're getting into some really big units here. 60-gallon tank, 155 max PSI with 20.6 CFM at 40 PSI and 18.1 CFM at 90 PSI. So this is actually a very, very nice, good unit. And again, being a 230 volt unit, you're really going to need to have some good power for this one as well now. But again, it's worth it for a big unit like this. Again, that's for some very heavy duty stuff now that you're doing with this one. So that's some industrial work. Again, that one's good for a shop. Welcome to the Sandborn line. Now, what I want to show you guys here is the research I have done through Google, Facebook, and learning from a lot of these people is that all this information led me to the Sandborns. Now, something really good about Sandborn is that a lot of people don't really talk about the relationship between the manufacturer and the retailer. Now, Sandborn was founded in 1963, and their first Canadian retailer was Princess Auto, and no sale is final until you're satisfied. And they, if you had a problem with the Sandborn, Princess Auto's got your back, and Sandborn's got your back. So it's really good. Now let's go into talking about these units. Now these two are single stage, and that one at the end is a dual stage. Now let's talk about the specs. Now let's get into the first one here. Now this one is a 60-gallon unit with the 135 max PSI with 11.5 CFM at 90 PSI. Again, seeing these consistent numbers, I think you guys are seeing a pattern here, and 13.4 CFM at 40 PSI. Now, this one is really good for longer tool runtime, spraying, sandblasting. This is really good for you. That's a good unit. Now, let's get into the really, really big bad boys. This is an 80-gallon unit, 155 max PSI, 14.0 CFM at 90 PSI, and 16.1 CFM at 40 PSI. And now, this one I think is really good for, bigger industrial use, a lot of that stuff. And especially when you're running, a shop, small shop, but even some of the bigger size shops this one is pretty good for you. But now I really want to get into this bad boy, and why this one truly is the perfect and best compressor for you if you are running an industrial shop, and why it's best and perfect for me. Now, why this one was the one I chose was because, one, I want to show you guys the Max Psi at 175 is really, really good. And I want to show you guys the CFM at 175 being 17.0. Again, that is really good to see. Now, being 17.9 CFM at 100 PSI, that's pretty good. And this is a dual stage. So this is a very, very efficient compressor. Now, a lot of people on the internet talk about if you want CFM, go for a single stage, and if you want max pressure, go for a dual stage. And that's not necessarily true. CFM is CFM, and same thing goes with pressure. And you don't let it confuse you between the two stages. And although a dual stage is generally more efficient in every way, it's a lot more expensive. But a lot of the time, the dual stage will do all the job you need for you a lot of the time. You have to look and see what's best for you. An example is this sandblaster right here. This sandblaster, you can see here, it recommends 120 psi, or 5 to 15 CFM at 120 psi. And actually, both units accomplish that. But again, I like to have some extra headroom, that's why I'm going for this unit right here. Now here I'm going to be showing you guys the difference between a dual stage and the single stage compressors. Now starting off with the single stage compressors, how it works is a piston pushes air into a chamber, and the air from that chamber goes into the tank, and therefore making it a single stage. And going into the dual stage, how it works is you can see that there's two chambers there. One is that the first in this chamber has a bigger piston pushing air at a lower pressure into the chamber, and then the second piston, which is a smaller piston, pushes air at a higher pressure into the chamber, and then that air goes into the tank, making it therefore a two-stage. And what that does is it's easier on the motor, and when it's easier on the motor, it's able to more easily get up to those higher pressures to where a single piston would struggle with. I'm going to be showing you guys some tools right now to compare it to the different compressors, to show you guys where they belong and what different tool goes with each compressor. So let's go. Now here's an example of a tool to where you might be happy to have that additional headroom and power. Now you can see here there's quite a nice variety of different air tools here at Princess Auto. But let me just show you guys, for example, this spray gun. Now, it always says on the box the air requirements and specifications on the box. So let me come right up to the camera to show you guys this. You can see right there, hang on, in the print somewhere along here, it'll say the CFM requirements, the PSI requirements, and all that good stuff. And you can look at the different tools you have to be able to figure out, well, what kind of compressor am I needing for a variety of my tools. Now, something I just want to show you, there's a lot of different tools if you're doing body work. This one right here might be good. There's an angle grinder here, and it all has different specifications, but they're all pretty good. And I think this really does show how to really work on your compressor, but the last thing I want to show is maintenance. Now, let me come up to the camera to show this. Now this is a maintenance kit. You can see that there's some filters on there, the fluids you need, the synthetic fluids you need for your two-stage compressor, and there's all that good stuff on this. And I just want to show you this as well. You can get all of this at Princess Auto. Now I'm happy to show and see that Princess Auto has Bluebird, which I happen to know is a really good strong built hose. And I'm actually going to be moving up to a 1/2-inch hose because I want the flow to be good, and the purpose of upgrading to a big compressor, I want it to really pay off. So that's why I'm upgrading to a bigger hose and going with Bluebird. Now we're going to be talking about maintenance and accessories in the near future. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video about compressors. So please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.